Welcome back, everyone, to the Rise Above Heartless Materialism podcast, where we discuss many things that are loosely related to rising above heartless materialism. Lately, I've been talking about a lot of like Catholic insider baseball, but today we are going to talk about heartless materialism itself. And joining me is my good friend Andrew Miller, who is a game designer, illustrator, and man who thinks big thoughts. So welcome back, Andrew.
Thanks for having me back. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. It's just going to be it's kind of a bit of a lazy August out there, although we're getting close to September, so the humidity is lowering and I can just feel that fall is right around the corner. It's a beautiful feeling. Summer did go by very quickly though, so I'm kind of, I don't know how I feel about that, but yeah, maybe that's a good metaphor for today. Is summer has gone by quickly and we are in the fall of civilization, and double meaning there.
I hope not.
Yeah. So kind of the overview for tonight is, what is heartless materialism? What does it mean to rise above that? And it's kind of a nebulous, ambiguous, and very broad, complicated topic. So we're not going to try and exhaust and confine or contain and cleanly define that, but we're just going to kind of like stumble around in the dark a little bit. We're going to talk about, hopefully, what what materialism is, and what is it doing in our current world. And then an interesting parallel to the rise of materialism is also the rise of therapy culture and emotional expression. And then hopefully we'll get to some navigation of an exploration of what does it really mean to be human. And that last one is such a topic right now with the rise of AI, and the big question mark, and where is humanity going to go now that AI is just dominating the world at breakneck speed. So yeah. So the first question I have to you, Andrew, is we live in a country and an era of unprecedented freedom and material wealth. So are people really happy because of that?
Absolutely not. Yeah.
Absolutely not. Okay.
No way. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, we are, excuse the tone playing in the background if you can hear that. That's
I can't hear it.
my dryer. It plays a jaunty tune every time the clothes are done to celebrate, I guess.
Sounds like a fun dryer.
Yeah.
Or annoying after the first 10 times it plays.
Yeah. It's great, except also the washer plays a jaunty tune and the dishwasher plays a jaunty tune. So like the whole day is just way too cheerful.
Toxic optimism, or toxic positivity, as they say in the workforce.
Well, that's a good segue into our subject, because I think we're not, I think it's pretty obvious that people are not particularly happy.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, in a lot of ways, we are, at least feel like we are, by and large, uniquely unhappy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's, I think, a lot of reasons for that, but it's clear that material wealth, prosperity, having like not just a stable life economically, but like having abundance is not the key to happiness in any way. In fact, and having, as you say, freedom and choice, actually, like multiplying choice tends to make us more unhappy after a certain point, because we don't appreciate all of the extra choices so much as we like second guess the choices we make.
Yeah.
So like the what? And that I think the field is called positive psychology, where they have studied kind of the choice, the way in which multiplying choices makes us more kind of unhappy, even while we have like a better match for what we really want, like we have lots more choices. We can get a lot closer to whatever the thing is that we want, the show that we want, the, clothes that we want, etc. But because there's so much, it's never really clear if we have chosen optimally. So we're like, but what about that other one? How do I spend my time? And this huge array of choice also just kind of can paralyze us. So a lot of times I think less choice would make us more content, which is, I guess, the sad thing about having all of this freedom and choice is like it's actually part of the soup that makes us more anxious and unhappy.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of inevitable. But
you mentioned choice. So choice is kind of a cause for anxiety, and the abundance of choice. I think also with the abundance of choice, and then also with just with the progression of society, the development and advancement of civilization. I think the more we progress and advance, and with the more abundance we have, I think there's more of a societal pressure to, oh, well, you have all this, so that means you have to like utilize all this stuff to the maximum potential. And if you don't do that, then somehow you're a terrible human being. So there's an obligation to, like, it's not just like, okay, we've advanced and we have all this material availability, but there's almost like an obligation to, like, oh, well, since we have all that, you have to use that at an optimal level. I was just reading today an interesting article on First Things. I'm going to pull up the name so I don't get it right or get it wrong, because I can never remember the name. I only usually take a cursory glance at some of these current events. Lindsay Clancy, I don't know, are you familiar with the whole trial and that sort of thing? How it goes is was it 3 kids she had? She killed her kids, basically. And at first I was like, you hear that and you're like, oh, well, someone's psychotic, right? But then I didn't really look into it. I just like, oh, okay, another day in the fallen world. But then all of a sudden I hear that these women are rising up to defend her. I'm just like, okay, well, that's interesting. And then I finally read an article on First Things where the article, who was a woman, said, it's going too far that some of these women are actually accusing the husband of killing the kids. But then she said, well, at the same time, while the act of killing your kids is inexcusable, of course, we don't know if she was, acting under insanity or not. But if you read her, I guess her journal or her diary, she was very stressed out about doing the right thing as a parent. And everybody else around her said that, okay, actually, she's really concerned with being a good parent. Like, she tries really hard. And in her private thoughts, she's like, well, am I doing, is this enough? And then there's also the pressures of like, because, um, in recent years, we look back on some of the parentings of the past, and some of the things that were considered normal back then, we now view as abusive. And we trace a lot of psychological duress and problems to bad parenting. Our bad, our parents treating us poorly when we grew up. So there's a lot of blame on parents. So when young people become parents today, you have all this added scrutiny and pressures, like, okay, you better do it right, or society is going to severely judge you at best, or throw you in jail at worst. And so now, is that pressure what caused this particular mother to go insane and kill her kids? I don't know, but it was an interesting what's the term I'm looking for, expose. I'm probably going to use fancy words that I don't know what they mean and fail miserably. It was an interesting discussion, and raising the question of like and I think that is a perfect parallel to, like, yeah, not only do we have the option to be materially successful and to optimize all of our choices properly, but there's a pressure to do so. And if you fail in that regard, then you're somehow less of a human.
Right. Yeah.
Now, does everybody experience that? Probably not. That's probably more in, like, I'm guessing, like, middle class, suburban, lifestyles. I think some of the lower classes, stereotypically anyway, are a little less concerned with, like, that sort of suburban obsession with perfection. But a lot of people are middle class, so that kind of experience is not at all a stranger to people. So yeah.
I think it does kind of go hand in hand with the rise of the idea of privilege, right? Which is I think one of those, I think part of the broader attempt to kind of replace Christian virtue with like a new system of morality, and so like privilege is kind of a piece of the replacing original sin, trying to rebuild some sort of post-Christianity scaffolding or something. And privilege, the problem with trying to build a new morality system based entirely on humans is it's just brutal and pitiless, like I have a book which is just this like travel diary, essentially. This is a really talented cartoonist who is doing research for a giant graphic novel, and he released this travel journal, basically, about him traveling around researching for this thing. And this entire time he's just, he's traveling different places all by himself, and doesn't really have a lot of friends, doesn't have a lot of connections with his family, and he's just really, a lot of the time, really sad. And he records, he basically kind of draws to cope with the loneliness. And at one point he loses his drawing supplies for like a 6-hour train ride. And he's just devastated that he's lost his, he can't draw to kind of forget his loneliness, right?
Mhm.
And so he starts just feeling utterly miserable and alone. And then instantly his his rational mind, which he depicts as this little annoying creature, pops up and starts lecturing him about how good he's got it, how he shouldn't be sad, how he should, like how privileged he is, how much like there are people who are suffering way more than you. You have no right to be sad or lonely,
Mm.
right? And it's brutal, right? It's brutal to, even if you're just saying it to yourself, to deny yourself the your own feelings, right? To deny that you are not allowed to be lonely, you are not allowed to be
Mm.
sad
Yeah.
because you have some sort of abstract notion of privilege, or because there are people who are worse off than you. And there are, I'm not denying there are people who are significantly worse off than you or me, but that does not deny us the uh, what it doesn't mean that we deny ourselves normal human feelings and struggles.
Right.
Like everyone has those.
Mm.
Uh, but this idea, this idea that we're not allowed to be human if we have some sort of privilege is like brutal and destructive.
Oh.
Uh, so let's see. What was the initial question?
I'll get to it in a second.
Mhm.
Got it on a list here. But I wanted to mention you mentioned like someone who has privilege, just kind of torturing themselves. Like I have no right to be unhappy. Well, Saint Mother Teresa, who worked with the poorest people in the poorest, probably one of the, I think it might at the time might have been the poorest place in the world, in Calcutta, India.
Mhm.
When she traveled to affluent places, she didn't say, this is a person who would have had every right to say so. She didn't say, "Oh, look at how privileged they are," and just like, like they're such horrible people, and they have no right to anything. She would have had more case to say something like that than anyone else, because she sacrificed her life to care for the people who were dying on the streets. What she said was, they don't have material poverty. Um, they have a poverty where no one loves them.
Mm.
They have a
Yeah.
poverty of not being loved.
Yeah.
And you think about that, you kind of connect that to the rise of individualism and self-expression and materialism. And to me, it just makes sense. Now, I don't want to criticize individualism too much. I mean, for goodness sake, I wear a purple suit. Like, if that's not individualistic, I don't know what is, because nobody wears a purple suit except, well, at least nobody here in Nebraska.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
did see one person wear a purple suit once, though, at the church I go to, and it's uber traditional. So it's like the most traditional you can get in the state. So that was an interesting sight. I was just like, what? And no, it wasn't me. It was somebody else.
You gotta go meet that guy sometime.
I don't know where he is. I don't know how to find him. Um, but anyway, so you look at the connection between it's like the surge of materialism, the focus on accumulating personal wealth, uh, and then individualism, like I do what I want, what pleases me. And then you couple that with people are feeling unloved and unhappiness.
Mhm.
So obviously material wealth, I mean, we don't want to like demonize material wealth too much. Like you can get some level of happiness from things, but it's usually like short-lived, right? You get a new, I don't know, a new TV or something, and for a couple of weeks, like, oh wow, this is so cool. And then after a month, it's like, it's just the thing we watch TV on, you know? It
Yep.
just becomes routine and dull and unexciting. So, what's I gonna say? So, so yeah, the basically like the more I focus on me, the worse I actually make my world. Partly because yeah, some more conservative religious minded will make the point that well yeah, if you're miserable, go help somebody else. It's like, okay, fair enough, but it's not just that. It's if everybody is selfish and self-centered, then nobody's going to be loving someone else, and so nobody's going to get any love because we're all like looking out for number one, and you're going to deprive people of human connection. And so there's going to be loneliness, and I believe there are plenty of psychological studies that like, yeah, loneliness literally causes disease.
Yeah.
So if you want a
Yeah.
materialistic empiricist reason to not be or to not make material wealth your sole goal in life, then there you go. Like
Mhm.
if all you care about is getting stuff, then um, you're not going to be happy. So, but again, like having a certain like base, your base needs met, you know,
Mhm.
anything below that, is probably, yeah, going to cause a lot of unhappiness. But once you get to a certain point, I mean, I believe even Jordan Peterson has cited research on this. Like once you hit a certain income level, your happiness does not increase after that.
Yeah.
Purely from a raise in income. So anyway, you asked what our first question was. So that was, we live in a country and an era of unprecedented freedom and material wealth. So are people really happy?
Yeah. So I want to pick up on something that you said. Uh, so when you're talking about happiness, uh, you know, doing things that get you focused on not on yourself, right?
Mhm.
Like not thinking about yourself. Like the more that you focus on yourself, the more miserable you are.
Mhm.
Research is pretty clear. This is kind of how it works. There's one of those things that the more you chase personal happiness, the more it eludes you. Um, but you kind of need another reason to like help people and give to people outside of your personal happiness, because
Right.
I don't think it's sufficient to kind of go, okay, got it. I shouldn't be focusing on myself because that won't make me happy. So I need to focus on other people because that will make me happy.
Right.
Like, well, you're still focusing on yourself, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really important to, I mean, I think a good parallel is love, right?
Right.
Like if you have a strong desire to be loved, it's not going to like go particularly well for you because it is not something that the more that you chase love, the more that like it's hard for people to love you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the more keenly you kind of want it, um, the harder it is for you to get it, right?
Right.
Uh, it's something that only comes to you when you are able to pour out love to other people unselfishly, unselfconsciously,
Mhm.
and then like love comes back to you. I think it's the same way with happiness, where if I'm if I'm able to get outside of my own head and I'm able to focus on other people enough, right? Um, then I'll be happier, but not because I want it, right?
Right.
And that's kind of the trap of some of these things. The more you chase them, the more they run away from you.
Yeah.
Is like you kind of have to be doing things that make you happy for other reasons than happiness.
Hmm. Hmm. It's also it's kind of a cousin to that line of thinking. C.S. Lewis's quote, which I do not remember verbatim, but goes something like, "We live in the Shadowlands, where the light is always just around the corner, just out of reach." Um, so I think he meant that more in like an Augustinian sense of like, we can never truly be happy here, or we can never truly be happy without God. We're ultimately going to be happy in heaven, but I think you can also apply it to like pursuing happiness for its own sake. It's always going to keep running away. It's always going to be just around the corner. It's always going to be just out of reach. You're always going to have to keep chasing it and never get it. And I think modern life is just really like set up that way. Like, I mean, but it's kind of a weed among the wheat, because on the one hand, there is a beauty and a sense of fulfillment in like making your life and the world around you the best it can be. But I think there's a insidious like trap in there of like, oh well, if we just like make the world so we're in some kind of a utopia, well then you set up the scenario of everything's just out of reach. So it's like okay, if I just like work harder, then I get this job, and then I get all this stuff. Well, then okay, now I get to the next level. I get another promotion, another promotion, another promotion. The next car and all that sort of thing. And there's never any like rest. It's all, maybe I'm just speaking for myself because I'm a bit of a workaholic. It seems like I'm working all the time. And when I'm not working, it indirectly supports my work. If that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
But uh, I don't think I'm an isolated case, though. I think a lot of corporate um environments are very much that way. It's very much like, okay, you got to get the next achievement, next achievement, next achievement. Well, that works all very well for the corporation to advance its, to meet its quarterly goals. But what about the people who are in those? I mean, yes, you want to work hard, you want to try to accomplish things, but this sort of like lie that yes, once you get the next promotion, then you'll be, oh wait, no, once you get the next promotion, then oh wait, no, once you know once
Yeah.
you buy all this, oh wow, oh guess what, buying a lot of stuff is good for other corporations. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not a communist. I'm not saying we should just have the government distribute it all. Private property is good, but at the same time, like, there's a right way to do that and a less than ideal way to do that. So I don't know, I feel like I'm kind of rambling a little bit. Does any of that make sense? Or
Yeah, I
uh
mean, I think it's built into America in some sense. Like
yeah.
we have the idea of pursuit of happiness, right? It is kind of an ideal,
Hmm.
which is not a very good ideal. And we have the notion of the American dream, which is, it's about having a family, but it's also about material wealth and house and
Hmm.
everything, right? And then we have all these like uh, forces within capitalism that are just trying to profit,
Mhm.
and that will tend to, push us towards feeling deprived, um,
Mhm.
feeling like we need the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. But, you know, it's like it's ever diminishing returns after a
Mhm.
certain point, right? And I think, as Christians, we kind of need to, uh, like, as Christians in America, I think it's important to kind of recognize that using any like wealth that comes our way to chase ever smaller and smaller gains in our own convenience or
Mhm.
our own, material,
Yeah.
what have you, is probably they would probably be reasonably described as not Christian, right?
Yeah.
Um, I think we very much under uh, what we do not focus nearly enough on the dangers of wealth and greed and the piece of individualism, which is uh, a focus on me and what I want, right?
Right.
Um, Again, I mean, like we've maybe talked about this before, but there's uh, I think there's something admirable. There's an admirable piece to individualism, which is
Mhm.
like it's admirable to be able to kind of be competent and to be able to, um, you know yourself and know what you like and be able to in like uh, be competent in a wide range of things. But past a certain point, it becomes kind of a self self idolatry in a lot of
Mhm.
ways, uh, and a fantasy because we are dependent on each other. Even the most survivalist focused libertarian out there is still, he wants the ambulance to show up
Mhm.
if he chops off his leg, and we're all still utterly dependent on each other, even if we can take reasonable steps towards being more
Yeah.
dependent.
Yeah. You mentioned the dangers of wealth and greed. I had two thoughts about that. On the one hand, I think there is a certain kind of noble sentiment. There can be a noble pursuit of and use of wealth in that, okay, I'm going to try to succeed and build my empire so that I can benefit other people. And I think to a certain degree, capitalism is kind of wired that way. Like it's difficult to really rise to the top without serving people at some level. Like you can't be if you're a complete scam, then sooner or later people are going to catch on, and you're either going to get thrown in jail or you have to at least switch to a different scam, and then you're feeding at the bottom with a number of quick, short-lived scams that really can't get you very far. But so in order to rise to the top, generally you have to like have some level of competency at providing other people with what they want and need. The other side, the danger is I think when such a person becomes solely focused on, okay, I'm going to use all my wealth so I can make a paradise on earth. And you and I as Christians know that sorry, there's no such thing as paradise on earth. Like, obviously, you can improve conditions in some regard, but many times when we improve conditions in one way, we often make them worse in another way. So utopia in a fallen world is kind of like a Rubik's cube, an
Mhm.
unsolvable Rubik's cube. You know,
Yeah.
it's like, okay, we got this line in place. Oh wait, but we disrupted that other line on the other side. So
Yeah.
just
That's a
keep
good
working
thing.
at it. You know,
Yeah.
and I think that idea of I'm not going to give back. You know, all I'm going to do with my money and wealth is going to, of course, the worst part is, you know, just spend it all on yourself. But I think there's a lot of people out there who believe that, who are doing good and believe they're doing good by, you know, investing in their business in order to move mankind forward. But you think about it, if that's all you do and you focus solely on your businesses and growing your empire, what happens when everybody's focused on that? Eventually, you know, when you're gonna like cut, you're gonna pay people your employees the lowest wage possible, and then eventually you look at it from a purely spreadsheet sort of way, they're not going to have enough money to buy your products anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're basically going to be trillionaires selling to trillionaires.
Yeah.
And then when your workforce becomes so poor that uh, they can't take care of themselves and just die, well, then eventually your great machine is going to come to an end. So, you know, that's an insidious thing with when you um try to do that sort of thing. I
But yeah,
forget. Go
sorry, it
ahead.
just loops back around to we need each other. And if you
Yeah.
uh, do take, short-sighted, selfish actions, even if they are actions that help people, right?
Hmm.
So uh, I think one thing that's missing from American business by and large is um, the notion that there are some things that are not worth providing, even if people want them, right?
Mm,
Like having profits and, you know, providing for what people want as the only moral guideline is insufficient.
right.
Because there's a whole lot of things that people want that are destructive to them,
Hmm.
um, that no one should be selling, right?
Right.
Um, there's the short sightedness about taking care of your employees, which is, uh, on an encouraging note, there are examples of companies that are like have bucked the American business trend. Um, if you look up, I would encourage you to look up uh, Barry-Wehmiller. I have to always check the name Barry-Wehmiller, which is there's like a little documentary on how the head of Barry-Wehmiller runs his business, like not only to take care of customers but to take care of his employees. And it's a place that is like people love working there so much that it's like a multi-generational thing where they have their kids come and work there too because it's just
Hmm.
such a wonderful environment. But the guy who's, the head of this company was just kind of a traditional, accounting business guy, and then had a realization at a wedding that like he had these hundreds of people who were actually like someone's daughters and sons working at his company, and that he needed to care for all of them as if they were like someone's children, because they are, right. um the company does really well financially because when you take care of your employees, they work really well for you, they want to stay, expertise stays in the company. When you take care of customers, you get more customers. But he's not doing this. If a company said, okay, strategically, we actually need to take care of our employees because that leads to more profits, then you get like a half-hearted, I don't know, how to be happy training program for the employees, and they pat themselves on the back and we've made our employees happy that we've ensured future profits. This guy is clearly a Christian man who feels a deep responsibility that goes beyond him and goes beyond profits and the future of the company to care for the people who are in his charge. And because it is beyond that, he is able to actually care for people the way that they should be cared, for, and build what I consider to be a really great institution. But it's very much the exception.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. So an interesting seeming parallel. I think it started a few decades later, but in the past 1 or 2 decades, we've seen the rise of therapy and emotional expression. Do you think that is that a reaction against materialism and empiricism, or do they go hand in hand? What do you think the reason might be for it didn't? I don't think it was very much a thing in the 60s, which is when I would say, to my limited economic knowledge, it seems that materialism very much was a post-World War II thing. The war kind of kick-started the economy, and then in the 50s, we saw the rise of the suburban lifestyle and move to, that's when the foundation for our current economy was really laid down, and that was really an era of, materialism and what some might call a bourgeoisie. But then therapy was very much like in the, I don't know, really with the rise of our generation, I think. That's when therapy really became a thing as we started to get older. And, I think our generation paved the way, us, we're millennials. And I think Gen Z really, we see that with the full manifestation, getting therapy is just like, it's just kind of like a normal thing for just about anybody. You have any thoughts, any ideas as to why, what started that? Is it a reaction against the materialism? Is it an attempt to solve some of the problems that materialism creates, or what do you think?
So I have a few thoughts on this. I don't think that all therapy is worthless or something.
No, I don't want to put that out there. Therapy can help people in certain circumstances.
Yeah, but I think it's pretty clear that we are leaning heavily on therapy, even when even when we don't necessarily need it, or even when the changes to our life are basic and maybe don't require therapy. Right? But I think that why we're maybe over treating ourselves has a lot of factors. I think it's generally the case that therapy is kind of destigmatized. There's been a lot of work to just kind of not make it a bad thing and make it just a part of life, which I think is, mostly a good thing, right? People, if they feel like if they really need this, they probably shouldn't feel terrible about trying to seek it out. So
Right.
that's good. I think it does correspond with a lot of the, which probably I think almost certainly kind of predates our generation, but with more of a self-focused uh, what yeah, like generally like individualistic. I'm focused on myself and my happiness. I think probably a lot of people would date that back to like the baby boomers being kind of a self-involved generation
Hmm.
generally, right? So like where do you go if you are really involved with yourself, over involved with yourself, and thinking about yourself all the time and thinking about your own struggles
Hmm.
all the time? Well, therapy is a place where someone will sit and listen to you talk about yourself for an hour. So as we get more people who are just, I'm trying not to use the word narcissistic because that is I think a over prescribed, like lay people prescribing people narcissism is.
Well, there's garden variety narcissism, and then there's like the official psychological condition of narcissism, and I think people confuse the two. When people saying narcissism, I think they're really just saying like garden variety selfishness and self-absorbedness.
Yeah, and that's very much clearly on the rise for many reasons, right?
Mhm.
I think there's a huge epidemic of just loneliness. And so therapists can be a stand in for what we should be going to friends for, right?
Mhm.
Like everyday struggles. I like a lot more and more people just have no one they feel like they can talk to. Um, I think it also corresponds with um, what I forgot my last point there, but
Glad I'm not
I,
the only one that happens to.
it's a tangled multi-factor thing
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure. Um, how it relates to materialism, um, I think it's very likely that they kind of move together a little bit. Um, like insofar as they're both, someone is more focused on themselves, and if they're more focused on themselves, they want to like. I think they generally become more materialistic because they want to get stuff for themselves, and
Hmm.
they also become more likely to needlessly go to therapy, I guess.
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Um, None of that is to say I can, like I don't want to cast everyone who goes to therapy as needlessly going to therapy, but it is definitely a problem.
Right. I think you brought up two really good. I think it's a double-headed cause. One is, yes, the more self-absorbed we get, the more we want to talk about ourselves. But I think part of it, I think you touched on this too, is a genuine need for that kind of support that we no longer get from families. Partly because, I mean, the rise of materialism. I think the reason why this is a delayed reaction is because, materialism started, I would say, in the 50s. And then, you have, the boomers who are kind of like the first generation materialists, I'll say. The first real generation. Obviously, the generation that raised them had to kickstart it, but I think they were the first ones. I think, and I think they really, they were still riding on the foundation of the culture, and so they could really like take the reins and just really enjoy all the fruits of that individualism, that pursuit of self gratification. And then but what does that do? Like you get people who are marrying for selfish reasons. You're getting people who have kids for selfish reasons. And you have the rise of corporate culture. So you got people working not just like longer hours, but outside the home. So there's not as much involvement with the parents and the kids. And if there are, the kids, at first they might be all cute and cuddly, but as they get older, then it quickly becomes like, yeah, these kids are kind of a drag, man,
Mm-hmm.
a drag to
Yep.
my and I don't want to say all boomers are like that, but it's definitely, with the change in philosophy during the 60s and the focus on self, and so you have that. And then boomers raised millennials. So I mean, the boomers certainly provided materially for us millennials, but I raised the question of if that was often where it was left. And with many cases, you have like divorce. And so divorce breaks up families, traumatizes kids. And all of a sudden, you have kids who no longer have continual access to at least one of their parents. So they're getting less, support, reassurance, counseling, And I think that's another interesting thing I just thought of too, is like with the rise of feminism and men kind of being, pushed into a more passive role. We no longer get, it's no longer the role of the father to be a man of wisdom and to impart to his children, like, this is kind of the way the world is, and this is kind of the facts of life. And so millennials are basically like, okay, we gave you all you wanted, go to college and learn your stuff and go get a job and do what we did. Well, now we're finding that we millennials are just kind of like adrift in a sea, and we're trying to figure life out, and we're doing it without the rise of even more individualism. Even you get like I don't know, is it a millennial thing or is it a Gen Z thing to like cut ties with your parents? I can't remember if it's both or if it's just Gen Z, but you figure that in. And so so at least Gen Z in particular were isolated. There are no there's no family to listen to you, talk through your problems, and give you advice. And even if there is, chances are, I mean, that they've got a good, healthy dose of selfishness, even if it's not quite as pronounced. So they're going to be arguing or they're going to be counseling you from a self-centered perspective. So of course, that's nothing new. That happens all the time. But I think one could make the case that in previous times when Christian morality was more of a solid thing, then there was at least a superficial obligation to like at least look like you care about your kids. But maybe there were certain pathologies that came from that. But if you have and then add in the fact that people today also can't even form friendships. It's like, well, what do you expect when you have like a self-centered society? Then I'm not going to want to be around anyone else, and they're not going to want to be around me because we're both selfish and we're both taking and not giving. So yeah, the only thing left is, oh, well, it's your job. I pay you, so you have to listen to me. I mean, I don't think this is something that people talk about a lot, but when you really lay it out in the open, like it's very dystopian.
Yeah. It is. Uh, it's a very sad situation we are in as a country. I think for all of our material wealth, we're just deeply impoverished in a lot of ways. And
Mhm.
in like most of the ways that matter, like most of the things that matter, we are lacking, right?
Yeah.
Like, doesn't more money doesn't do much to make a dent in being deeply lonely and disconnected and unhappy and like none of that. More money doesn't matter. I think that the other thing is like uh, therapy is, it also can kind of be, let's call it a band-aid, right? Like
Yeah.
it didn't displace a lot of these things. It
And
was kind of a
I
fix,
want to
right?
interject really quickly that for those with, you know, like actual psychological illnesses, mental illnesses, sometimes like even a healthy family isn't always equipped to properly deal with that sort of thing,
Yeah.
So I want to very much like um assure everyone that I'm not trying to say that therapy is
We're not
evil, like
we're
just go
not
home,
taking
just
a
go to
hard
your
line
family, just
stance.
go to
Yeah.
your family. It's like,
Hmm.
no, like there are some conditions where like your family can't always help you even if they're healthy and functioning and loving, because they just don't understand the nature of the illness. But um for the average person who doesn't have a mental illness, then so anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I just wanted to make sure we put that out
Yeah.
there.
We're trying to be careful here. I think it's a good thing. Trying to be careful not to overstate what we're saying
Yeah.
and to like demonize this. But I think also therapy has kind of been a band-aid fix for a lot of the failings of the church too,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
there's also kind of that uh, support, counseling, and um, just like love within a church structure, which is just missing from a great deal of people's lives.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, uh,
You
rough.
meant, yeah, you mentioned therapy being a band-aid. What like a band-aid for like what would be the deeper problem, do you think?
Um, I think a lot of things that we've been talking about. I think
Hmm.
loneliness, but also like we just have uh, we have a crisis of meaning. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
we don't. There are fewer ways in which we kind of need each other, um, because there's more kind of technology and systems for providing for our basic needs. So like
Hmm.
you don't need to ask all your neighbors to help put up a barn or whatever.
Hmm.
You don't even need to talk to the person dropping off your food, right? So like there's a lot of ways in which technology has just driven us apart, and where it's really hard, even in ways that like technology has made some things better, but it continues to uh, just naturally push us apart.
Yeah.
Um, and that's, I'm thankful that I can fix my washing machine by looking up a thing on YouTube, right? The guy who fixes washing machines and tells me how to take it apart. And, hey, I fixed it. I don't have to hire someone. But there's also a sense, I think, for a lot of people our age who are internet savvy to kind of not ask for help, not ask for advice from a
Mhm.
real person that we know. And I think that needs to become more of a sense of a responsibility, as a Christian responsibility, to ask for help from people you know, um, even maybe even before you search YouTube or like, ask Chat GPT or something,
Mhm.
um, because it connects you together, and it, really, gives the other person something that they can, like, blesses them, because being able to help someone else is a blessing.
Yeah.
I have a really good example from my life, because I struggle to actually ask people for help, because I have kind of the attitude like I can figure whatever out myself. And a couple months ago, my 10-year-old daughter, for the people at home, 10-year-old daughter is got really excited about uh, building a hovercraft. So she had a
Mm.
backyard projects book with a plan for making a hovercraft out of a leaf blower and stuff, right? And I grew up a farm boy, but I'm not really that handy, and I don't
Mhm.
have very many power tools. And so she asked me about this, and I was like, okay, gosh, I could maybe try to figure out how to make this, right? But I already could see I'm you know, in over my head. I could imagine this is probably going to be multiple weekends of me struggling with my incompetence with woodworking. And like, I don't even know if I can. It's just like trying to think through, how do I even just like cut a giant circle out of wood with the tools that I have? And then, all of this stuff about like asking people for help has been going through my mind. I thought, oh, hold on. Why didn't I just ask my dad? My dad has a big wood shop, and um, it didn't occur to me right away, which is silly. But uh, I asked him, and then he and uh, Eleanor had a wonderful time, like planning, like getting ready to, oh, we're gonna make this, and Dad sourced down a couple different leaf blowers, and he like made all the plans and everything, and they got together and they were, building this hovercraft, and they made a way better hovercraft than I could have ever made. And you know, Ellie had a great time. Dad had a great time. It was like a blessing for both of them. And I could have, if I'd just like forged ahead trying to do it myself, it probably would have been like a like miserable failure,
Mhm.
right? But instead, just because I asked for help, it was like this blessing for Dad, for Eleanor, and for me, like, because I don't have to struggle for weekends trying to make this thing that I don't know how to make. Uh, I think that's something that we don't do enough, because we feel like we don't have to
Mm.
ask people's advice,
Yeah.
but like, think about being the first generation where your kids don't rely on you for like a great deal of knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Like, have you ever seen the movie 12 Angry Men?
Yes.
Okay, so like the oldest juror who talks about like the elderly witness who kind of came to the stand just kind of because he needed to be listened to, and he needed a little respect, and he needed, and he wasn't getting that. And so like, he may have exaggerated his story just because people were actually listening to him and paying attention to him.
Mm.
And I think that's a need, like, that this is something that's very much has been very much a part of humanity until us, which is, where do you get most of your information about the world? Your elders, right?
Yeah.
And now it's like, well, I can go find better help and better information, at least in theory, online somewhere, from someone who's a real, plumber or whatever.
Yeah.
But the thing is, that is also a little bit of like a, I guess a little bit of a self-deception too, because, well, I can find a lot of information just by, asking for it. It's information that's often lacking in like context,
Hmm.
lacking in, addressing specific problems. And also, I often am not knowledgeable enough to know, when there's a, like, when the information is bad. It is especially relevant with AI models.
Hmm.
And I think the more that we can try to conscientiously reach out to people and ask them for help, even when we don't need to, even when we could go buy a bag of sugar, like asking our neighbor for a cup of sugar is, I think, better, right? It
Hmm.
should be seen as something that's more desirable
Hmm.
as a Christian, because then it's giving someone else the opportunity to bless us and to give, right?
Hmm.
And it binds us together.
Yeah. Yeah. I really think especially kids need their grandparents. I think that is I think that's a I think that's an easy, well, it should be an easy um way for them to learn as well, because traditionally the grandparents, they're a little easier to approach, they're more inclined to spoil the kids because they don't have to worry about the demands of providing for the family and actively raising the kids and teaching them. They can take a more like distant approach, not distant, less stressful, less pressured approach, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So, and old people that just they usually have so many good things to say. Sadly, I don't think that's going to be the case moving forward, because it was a beautiful thing with our grandparents' era. But I think baby boomers onwards, because you've got like millennials and Gen Z just cutting themselves off from their parents. So when they have kids, well, sorry, mom and dad won't let you talk to your grandparents. And I wish I could say that that was always unfounded. I imagine in many cases it is, but I'm sure there are also plenty of cases where it's actually a good thing. As the world gets uglier and uglier, that's going to be more the case. But we can only pray, I think, that as the grandparents become grandparents and get older, that they begin to see things from a more wiser and generous
I would
perspective.
push back a little bit though.
Okay.
So I think it's almost never the case where cutting yourself off completely is the right thing to do.
Hmm.
I think it's, you know, I've actually talked with my dad about this, because my dad is a therapist, for those of you who don't know.
Hmm.
Um, uh, and uh, he talks about the deficiencies of kind of younger therapists because all they know is boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. If someone does something you don't like, set up a boundary, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's, cutting relationships off is like the ultimate boundary, of course.
Right.
But the thing that so many people don't realize is about boundaries is like healthy relationships don't need boundaries.
Right.
And because people like can automatically kind of intuit how to treat you properly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And uh, cutting people off is, I think, only really morally what I think morally appropriate in the case of like serious abuse and stuff.
Yep.
Because just cutting people off because they're deeply unpleasant, or they have wacky political views, or they lecture you, or they like make you miserable in various ways it's not a sufficient reason to cut people off, in my view. It might be a reason not to spend a great deal of time around them. It might be a reason to, like limit time with them. But I don't think it's ever Christian to be like, we're done. Again, except in really extreme cases.
I completely agree, and I'm glad you made the clarification. And that's what I was referring to, as mental health declines and things like drug use go up and selfishness continue, and as everything just gets worse and worse, then I think we are going to see a rise in those cases where it could even be dangerous to keep contact with your parents. But of course, that sort of thing is abused by the kids who are also selfish and oversensitive and aren't willing to sacrifice a little comfort in order to preserve familial ties. That's definitely a thing as well. But when both parties are selfish, then I keep using the word selfish throughout this whole podcast. I feel like I'm going to start bursting out into the VeggieTales song.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's an underlying theme. Like it kind of underlies a lot of our woes is selfishness. And I think if we don't find a way to improve, to become, find our way back to sanity and to each other, I don't think it's going to be so much a problem of people cutting their parents off or kids having like really dysfunctional relationships with their parents, so much as it's going to be a problem like people not having kids.
Yeah.
I think
we're already seeing that. Yeah, definitely.
What can I ask? Okay, like, so we've been kind of talking diagnosis, kind of looking at taking things apart. What's to be done?
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about that?
I have a kind of maybe what might be a transition point to that. You mentioned briefly that therapy might be a bit of a band-aid for meaning. And I think, if I was to guess, I imagine just wanting to talk about yourself and your problems and have somebody to listen is part of it. But I imagine there's also people who go to therapy because they're suffering and they want to know why. And maybe I'm being judgmental, but I imagine a lot of postmodern psychology is not prepared to give satisfactory answers as to why people suffer. And so that's just gonna, they're probably just gonna say, well, you shouldn't have to suffer. And so, do these things like you're saying, cut your parents out of your life because they make you suffer, or you can do whatever you want, so it won't make you suffer. Well, as you and I know, that usually results in greater suffering. And then when the question is like, well, how do I don't understand. I thought I was not supposed to suffer, but all I'm doing is suffering. And so then it's like the only way to end it is, ending your life. I think so. It's a very tragic way. But to flip that around to the what is the cure? I think, leading us to the final point, what does it mean to be human? I think a big part of that is, it is to love, which gives meaning to the suffering, the tragedy of life, or as Jordan Peterson puts it, like, pick yourself up and sort yourself out and make the world around you as better of a place as you can. But I'll take that a step further. If you remove God from that formula, then all you have is, oh, we're on a sinking boat, so I might as well take a bucket and bail water out of the Titanic, So it's like, oh, make the world around you better. It's like, okay, well, I can only do so much. I can't make the world into the Garden of Eden again. So that's where Jordan Peterson did me a lot of good, but I finally reached a point where I was like, you know what, I've exhausted everything he has to say, and it was good, but it's very limited. And I really believe that, there's no mistake. There's no evolutionary quirk that the majority of humanity for all of history had some kind of religion. And that's because there is part of us that if you tell us this is all there is, we don't even want this because it's horrifying. So there's some seed inside of us that says there is something more, and there is an end to the suffering here, because we know there's an end. That's part of the postmodern utopian idea, is that we can remake matter into something that fully satisfies us. And the inherent urge that we feel is that something is wrong. I mean, because if I would think that if I'm going on a bit of a rant here, if I would think that if this was all there is, why would we ask the question, is this all there is?
Right.
Why would we be having the conversation?
Yeah.
Like, why would we be discontent?
Yeah.
Why would we want an end to the suffering if we didn't know that there was an end eventually?
Mm-hmm.
And so that part is looking to life after death. And the Christian understanding of it is partaking in, the grace of God, the life of God, and that is how you can have the greatest possible happiness on earth. Now, in the Catholic understanding, paradoxically, many of the closest people to God endured some of the worst sufferings. But strangely, they were able to keep a peace and a joy about them. There's a early church martyr, I think it's Saint Lawrence, who is said to have the Romans killed him by putting him on a grill and roast him over a fire. And he said, laughing during it, he said, "Turn me over, I'm done on this side."
Oh gosh.
I mean,
oh man,
can you imagine
what a
just
guy.
the ridiculous amount of pain that you're undergoing and being able to joke
Yeah.
about it?
Jeez.
I mean,
It's fantastic.
why wouldn't you want that? And the answer is because it's because you have to look the suffering straight in the eye. That's why. In order to climb the ascent to the heavens, you have to walk over the spikes of suffering. And the only way you can do that is with grace enabling you. End of my trad Catholic rant. You know, I'm more of a trad than I thought I was. I never thought I'd make it to this point. You know, so anyway, that is my speech for the podcast. What are your thoughts, commentary, critiques?
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic speech. A couple thoughts on it, like you know, I think there are a few ways in which Christian belief helps alleviate a lot of the problems that we experience here. Like, we're going to, still suffer. We're going to still have problems, many problems, often more problems because we're Christians. In a lot of ways, right? But we get to give a meaning to the suffering, right? We get to drink the cup of Christ and try to bear the load. And it's not just for no reason. I think there's a lot of suffering that's caused by selfishness and sin, that we might be blind to it, but at least we have more of a moral understanding and tradition to help root out sins that we're blind to, that are causing us pain, right? Causing us and other people pain. But yeah, it's the other thing I want to bring up is building the kingdom is also something that's important.
Yeah, absolutely.
That we can connect this. I grew up in a church tradition that tended to be more kind of, I don't know, end times, like just focused on afterlife kind of thing, right? Not particularly interested in people suffering right now, or trying to do just physical good for people in the world. But I think that's also really important, to not just focus on, well, we'll suffer now, but at least we'll escape and be happy. We'll be transformed, right? Go to heaven. But rather, it is important for us right now to be building God's kingdom, and to be it's not just meaningless to help people and serve people and do good. because like it is really difficult without God. I think the most honest atheists recognize that like there's no ultimately like good virtue. There's love. There's really nothing without God in the picture. I think there's a lot of people who are kind of humanist atheists who try to take some sort of like sense of virtue and just take it as a given,
Mm-hmm.
Without God, and act like that can work.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that it actually, like, I think that's just kind of borrowing pieces of God
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
pretending that he doesn't exist.
Absolutely. And then at some point they have to ask themselves the question of, well, who am I to say that my sense of morality is any better than the Aztecs who practice human sacrifice?
Yeah, and
Right?
the answer would be it isn't, right?
Yeah,
Because it can't
because
be.
there's no standard. There's only like feelings, which in a sense is also kind of a nod to Christianity, because well, at least I don't know if this is the case in Protestant traditions, but in Catholic understanding, there's the idea of the natural law,
Mm-hmm.
that everybody is naturally like born with a sense of it. And it's kind of like your conscience. So if you're saying that, it's funny because you say, well, you can be a moral person without, being Christian. Well, then why does your morality look closer to Christianity than it does other religions? That's a question they have to
Or
ask
why
themselves.
is your morality not completely flipped on its head, where it's good to betray and hurt people because it increases your glory or power, right?
Well,
That would be equally valid.
and truly atheist regimes are like that. They're called communism and fascism and
Yeah.
so on and so forth.
Yeah. Whew.
Well, I think we solved all the world's problems.
Good for us. That's a productive 90 minutes if we did that.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
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 I had fun
That
though.
was kind of an
Really great to
intense
talk.
conversation.
Yeah. Well, you picked some dense questions, man. I was sweating over them. I was like chewing on them all week. I was like, man, oh man, do I have anything to say about this? It's just like huge questions. But
Well, little secret. So was I. I was like, what am I gonna have to say about all this stuff? It's like I didn't major in philosophy. I
it's a
actually
good
didn't.
discussion, though.
This is probably bad PR for me, but I actually never finished college. So this is a lot of stuff for a college dropout.
You gotta keep growing and learning.
Absolutely,
Part
absolutely.
of life.
Cool. Well, do you have any closing ideas or thoughts or anything we didn't really tie up that you want to comment on? Or
I don't think so. I really appreciate you having me back. It's always a real deep pleasure to talk these things over with you on and off camera. Yeah.
I don't know how many good qualities I have, but I think I can safely say that I'm not superficial.
It's good. That's a good thing. Mm-hmm.
What was it I was going to say about myself? was the? I can't remember the other one. Anyway. All right. Well, thank you again, Andrew, for joining me. And is there anywhere that people can go to see your work?
AndHeDrew.com.
AndHeDrew.com. All right, excellent. Everyone, check out check out Andrew's illustrations, and imagine some of your game work is on there too as well. He has a very shall I say, whimsical style, a very colorful, whimsical. Just kind of quirky a little bit. I say this as someone who has been called quirky recently. And just a really real delight. So go check it out. And all right. So until next time, all.